Hello, welcome back to Uncanny Oddities. Tonight we are doing Season 4, Episode 7, with Part 2 on Bigfoot. Bigger feet, we're going to need a bigger shoe. I just couldn't resist making a few jokes here and there, you know. Of course, had to. So, what we're doing tonight is I have found a very interesting a bit of a longer Bigfoot story, but I'll use voices if I can, so I'll make it more interesting. So I got a Bigfoot story from something that I found on a website called paddlingmag.com. It's a Bigfoot encounter on an island, so I thought that sounded pretty interesting. Uh, and then we have the 10 most convincing Bigfoot sightings. We're going to go through those together. And then we have the most famous Bigfoot sightings. The first one is on outsideonline.com, and the second one is on livescience.com. Two different lists we're going to go through. And they have different sightings on each list, so that's why we're going to go through. There's a little bit of crossover, but only like I think there's only like two or three that cross over. So we're going to go through but two different lists, and then I found a list of what people say are the 10 best Bigfoot books we're going to go through at the end if anyone else wanted to do any more of their own research on Bigfoot. So let's go ahead and get the first area pulled up. Let's go ahead and see what we got going on here. All right, so we're going to start with Sander Jane's terrifying Sasquatch encounter in Clayoquot Sound. He thought he was alone at the cabin until. So I think that's just like an introduction to the, you know, website or whatever, you know. And as I said, as you can tell from the little bar over here, it's a bit of a longer story. So I might skip a few parts, but I'm going to try to make sure we get the good parts, you know, get the good segments in here. So Sander Jane's terrifying Sasquatch encounter in Clayoquot Sound. In early summer 2014, everything seemed to fall into place. I prepared for a stay of 1 to 2 months, a solitary hidden cabin clinging to the vastness of the wild scenery and representing the only human trace in this realm would act as a perfect home base. My intention was to explore the nature of wilderness living, tune in with the region's pristine air, observe wildlife, and sharpen my senses in interplay with the natural world. I wanted to deeply connect to the feeling of being in this place and situation rather than exploring the place itself. The spirit of the trip would be quite different from my past wilderness journeys, in that I wasn't looking to go on an ambitious, destination driven adventure. My aim was simply to see what I could learn from being myself in my favorite wild place. I found myself heading out into the Sound on a sunny morning in mid July. When the shuttle boat I had hired entered the mouth of the inlet, I felt the overpowering dimensions of the place reduce our human scale to insignificance. So he's just going out on a kayak, you know, having a nice day so far, right? Going to go visit a cabin in the woods and just have a nice little, you know, cabin hunting vacation. Okay? A rustic cabin in the woods. So here we go. A the cabin nestled secretly between the waterline and steep forested mountain slopes behind. I unloaded my kayak and boxes full of gear, waved at the driver, and watched his boat disappear into the distance. This had been my dream for 2 years. I moved into the cabin, settled in, and started the simple, rustic, yet very comfortable and gentle way of wilderness living I had imagined. The cabin was an ideal home base and a safe shelter. The days were sunny, without a single cloud in the sky, the nights starlit and cool. I observed the morning fog lifting off the mountains and the fjord when I awoke, saw the tides roll in and out in front of the cabin, watched the light revealing the many different facets, shades, and moods of my favorite place. In most wild and abundant places, you rarely see the wildlife, although it is there on its elusive missions, defying human understanding. Here, however, bald eagles, kingfishers, gulls, ducks, seals, sea lions, and river otters revealed themselves quite frequently. The haunting call of a loon traveled across the water from the estuary in the evening, and often I could hear the deep booming of male salty grouse resounding from deep inside the mountain valleys. I paddled to the river estuary each day and evening, quietly sitting in my kayak, observing and listening. After dark, I ate dinner by candlelight inside the cabin, and then switched on my headlamp to write wildlife reports and journal notes. Later, I lit incense sticks to keep the mosquitoes away and fell asleep, comforted by the solitude of this remote place, so used to echoing back at itself without the attendance of a human witness. My mind was free of distractions, and time seemed to stretch. 4 beautiful days of living in the moment felt like weeks. I came to realize that part of the beauty of my favorite place and its appeal to me was its unapproachable seclusion. As much as it was a place of bright beauty, abundance, peace, retreat, and serenity, it also carried an obscure air of reticence, inaccessibility, twilit hostility, and deep mystery. I could sense nature's inexhaustible potential and energy there. It was wild, a place for humans to visit, but not to remain, as he would soon come to be told. We do not take callers right now, but we would consider doing that in the future, possibly. I would have to speak with my fellow hosts and co-host as my co-host status, and I would have to verify that with the other uh, hosts. But I will definitely let them know that people would be interested in that, and we can see if we could get something set up. Boulders rolling in the night. On the fifth day, I lay down for a nap in the afternoon and awoke to the filtered light of early evening. I launched my kayak and went for my customary paddle to the river estuary. When I returned, I noticed the first weather change since my arrival. After dinner, I stepped outside onto the front porch. The clouds were a lid sealing the roof of the fjord and making the standing air close and muggy. In the pitch black beyond the porch, the night was conspicuously silent. Conspicuously silent. My bad. Sorry. The water was still, there wasn't a breath of wind, and I couldn't hear any bird calls or seals catching fish close to shore like the previous nights. Okay, so something is starting to change here. Hey, old 8 Gauge, good to see you. Glad you could show up. So I'm starting off by reading through a Bigfoot encounter story, and then I'm going to read through some brief synopses of about 15 to 20 of the most popular sightings and encounters. And then, as a bonus at the end, I've got 10 Bigfoot books that people highly recommend. So you're in for a treat tonight. So far, for anyone just joining us, we're reading this, and so far they're just, they went to a cabin. They wanted to have a nice, relaxing vacation away from, the city life and, go live in nature, And so far, everything's been normal, but now they've experienced their first weather change, and things are about to get different. Things are about to get serious now. I went back inside and exchanged texts with my friend in Tofino on my satellite communication device. Then I heard a strange sound somewhere in the distance. I stepped back out onto the porch and listened carefully. Yes, there it was again. It sounded as if big rocks or boulders were being turned over or thrown. Boom! 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 It must be a black bear looking for a late night snack in the intertidal zone. Sorry, had never seen that word before. I reasoned, or perhaps rocks loosened by the change in temperature falling out of the cliffs. Really? Rocks falling because of a change in temperature? I didn't. That seems a bit excessive to me. I didn't know that was possible. That seems a bit weird, but hey, whatever. Whatever helps. I strained to hear any other clue as to the source. That's when the strange owl like vocalization started. Ooh, ooh, it seemed like several of them replying to each other from different locations in the distance. Between the sounds was absolute silence. Half an hour later, the tumbling boulder sounds continued. Brushing my teeth, I tried to convince myself that the periodic silences were peaceful rather than strained. Suddenly, one of the rocks erupted with the intensity of an explosion. It was much closer than before. My toothbrush nearly fell out of my mouth. My hair stood on end. Was I not alone? Was there illegal logging nearby? I hadn't seen any lights, no traces of human activity at all. It couldn't be, especially not at 11:45 at night. No, I was completely alone in this remote corner of Clayoquot Sound, and I was beginning to feel it. My instincts told me to retreat into sleep. I had probably just allowed myself to get spooked. I felt almost comfortable retiring to the cozy half attic under the roof, away from the dark window panes that stared blindly out into the raven black night from three sides of the cabin. Very soon I drifted into sleep. The rock sounds and eerie calls continued cutting the silence outside. Okay, I think this is where Bigfoot shows up. I was rudely awakened from my dreams into a nightmare. I sensed this is what mortal fear feels like. Fully and immediately present, my eyes opened widely, my breath came to a stop, my heart pounded wildly, and I felt a torrent of adrenaline flood my body. I was petrified. My senses had never been more acute. I sensed that this is what mortal fear feels like. Loud stomping on the ground right next to the cabin surrounding boardwalk shook me to the very core. Each stomp made the cabin tremble. The massive force applied, and its rhythmic nature were absolutely intimidating. More than that, they were beyond anything that I could associate with the animals you would usually expect to encounter in these forests. The stomping was joined by the most horrifying vocalizations, disturbingly erratic and deliberate at once, tribal, not quite like human speech, but similar enough to recognize certain elements. It sounded as if something was trying to speak, shout, articulate itself without quite mastering the language. If our senses that are the in it is our senses that are the primary knower of truth and not our mind. If you know about science, I'm going to say electric universe, and I'll just leave it at that. Not trying to go on a whole other rant right now, but he's right about that. Just going to leave it at that. Even before my brain jumped in with a thought, my senses understood the message. Clear out, go away, leave. We are here. You cannot be here. I love doing my voices. It's fun. I suddenly yearned to start a life in the city and work in the safe boundary of an office, drawing a heavy curtain around everything that is wild. Well, that must have really terrified him because city life does not sound appealing to me as someone who lives it every day. It's very loud, and you can't even see the stars. I spent a week in the cabin. It was nice. But back to our story. After several seconds of this turmoil, I heard them leave with emphatic steps. Two bipedal creatures erratically running off with tremendous speed and agility, each footfall causing the ground of the cabin on it to tremble. I do sound effects. I pressed my hands against my ears as hard as I could. I wanted to seal off my senses. I hid under my sleeping bag in the darkness, every muscle in my body strained, fully covered in cold sweat. For the next few hours, I remained frozen, still pressing my hands against my ears and vowing that I would leave as soon as the light of dawn released me. Getting on the first flight out. All right, it sounds like we're just about done with this one. So, well, let's see how much we've got left real quick. Okay, yeah. We're almost done. We're almost done. Thank you for hanging in there with us. I know it's been a long story, but we're almost done. My love of adventure stems from challenging situations that make me present in the moment, but this experience was way too visceral, and my passion for adventure faded in those moments. I suddenly yearned to start a life in the city and work in the safe boundary of an office, drawing. Hey, we already read that. That night, I tried to send 17 messages on my satellite device, daring only to lift one hand to text my friend 55 kilometers away. I need a pickup right away. Please send a float plane, please. Of course, I didn't have a clear view of the sky from my hideaway under the roof. Still, I prayed that the messages would somehow send through the tiny air circulation window under the gable. I couldn't imagine moving to a more exposed spot. As dawn slowly seeped into the cabin, I carefully allowed my ears to listen again and my eyes to see again. I tentatively climbed down the ladder into the main living area and started packing the most necessary things into a few immersion bags. The float plane wouldn't be able to transport all my gear, but I didn't care about leaving things behind. I didn't dare look outside. Finally, I received a message back from my friend. I'm on my way down to the dock. I'll send you a float plane. An hour later, I heard the plane descending into the gigantic scenery of the fjord. I stepped outside into the overcast morning without turning back or looking around the cabin, walked down to the water, and caught the pilot's attention with my red rain jacket. How you doing? The pilot asked, searching my face for clues. I'm all right, I lied. Just didn't feel safe here last night. The ground was shaking, and I heard the sounds of moving boulders. Might not be a good thing to be trapped in this spot in case of an earthquake or landslide, right? There was no way I could tell him the truth without seeming crazy. But he pressed me, curious to learn more about the sounds I had heard. I described them precisely. That sounds like Sasquatch to me, the pilot offered. I hear stories from people up around here who see them turning over boulders on the shoreline. Later, my friend and Tofino would echo the pilot. I guess there's a reason why the First Nations call that place home of the Sasquatch. The plane turned down the fjord, picking up speed and lifting into the cloudy Clayoquot morning. We flew over the dense and mysteriously fogged forest, cloaking the inlet's mountain slopes. For the first time, I saw the waters, mountain ranges, cliffs, and river valleys of my favorite place from the air. I couldn't peel my eyes away. A mere 4 hours before, it had taught me what real fear is, and now I fell hopelessly in love with it all over again. So, thank you. Beautiful story. Very intriguing. Definitely was able to keep my attention. So, credit goes to Sander Jane, who is an outdoor photojournalist with a focus on wilderness, natural history, and conservation topics. His work has appeared in Geo, Explorer, Adventure Kayak, Natural History Magazine, and Canoe. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you very much. Now, next, we have the 10. Oh, wait. Hold on. Oh, they tricked me. They tried to make me pay for an article. Not doing that. Okay, this one's free, though. Okay, this other one is free, though. So we still got one. It's all right. We probably don't need both of them. That might be a little too long. So let's go ahead and, get this shared. Get this pulled up on the screen real quick. All right, now we're going to talk about some of the most famous Bigfoot sightings. So let's get right into it. So the William Rowe encounter in 1955. One of the most famous Bigfoot sightings allegedly occurred on Mika Mountain in British Columbia in 1955 when a man called William Rowe claimed he saw a partly human and partly animal creature while hiking. He swore an affidavit in 1957 that the creature was about 6 feet tall. Wait a minute. I'm 5'10". I'm about 6 feet tall. Come on now. And covered in brown, silver tipped hair. Well, look, my hair's getting pretty long. If I don't shave for a while, I might be able to pull off a Sasquatch look. Look, I can pull my hair together under my chin. Does that count? Can I be a Sasquatch? I'm having fun with it. With thick arms reaching down to its knees, broad feet, and breasts, according to the Alberta Sasquatch Organization website. So this one sounds pretty interesting. because if you gotta swear an affidavit, that's something that is done with cops at a police station. So you got to be very, very serious to do that. I'm pretty sure. I think that's something they use in court. Um, as I watched this creature, I wondered if some movie company was making a film at this place and that what I saw was an actor made up to look partly human and partly animal, Rowe wrote in his 1957 affidavit. But as I observed it more, I decided it would be impossible to fake such a specimen. According to Abominable Science Origins of the Yeti, Nessie, and Other Famous Cryptids from Columbia University Press 2013, Rowe's ape-like sightings marks a change from earlier Sasquatch accounts in British Columbia, which repeatedly described Sasquatch as a giant-sized indigenous person. In other words, it was the birth of modern Bigfoot, though the name wouldn't emerge for another year. Scientists argue that eyewitness testimony isn't always reliable, so this and other sightings are not conclusive evidence. Despite, what, hundreds, if not thousands of people having Bigfoot stories? Like, come on, eventually you gotta accept it. You know, as difficult as it might be for some people to believe when there's, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of stories, at some point we have to accept it. Like, even if we can't see it ourselves, and even if we don't know exactly what it is, these people are definitely seeing something because some of these people are terrified. I've seen cases involving missing people. Like, there's I I don't know exactly what, but I do believe there is something out there, something going on. Now, what, I'm not sure, but there's definitely something strange going on out there in the woods. Now, the Albert Ostman abduction in 1924, we mentioned this one on our previous episode briefly. This was prospector Albert Ostman claimed that he spent around a week with a Bigfoot family near Toba Inlet, British Columbia in 1924. This is the one our friend Old A Gage told us about last time. Ostman was camping alone when he says he was scooped up in his sleeping bag by a Papa Bigfoot and taken to meet Mama Bigfoot and two Bigfoot children. Ostman was supposedly held captive by the family, but said he eventually escaped when Papa Bigfoot ate Ostman's chewing tobacco and fell ill, according to a retelling of the story in anthropologist David Dagling's book, Bigfoot Exposed, an anthropologist examines America's enduring legend. Ostman's descriptions of his captors are similar to that of Rowe's 1957 account. However, Daegling points out in his book that even though Ostman said the encounter took place in 1924, he didn't write it down until 1957 after he heard Rowe's tale. So he may have been inspired or influenced by Rowe. Okay, I will admit that does, bring his credibility into question a little bit. If he saw it that long ago in 1924, why wait so long until 1957 to write it down after someone else wrote a book about it? Some people might argue that he was scared of what people might think about him, and then when Rowe wrote his account, he decided that, maybe it gave him the bravery that he needed to come forth with his own account. Either one is equally likely, so it can be difficult to make a firm decision in certain cases like this when they don't reveal their story until after someone else does, because either way, on the one hand, they might have been influenced, but on the other hand, they may have been influenced to share their own story through bravery. So it's kind of hard to say one way or the other. The Patterson-Gimlin film in 1967. This is literally the number one most popular Bigfoot thing. I'm pretty sure everyone knows about this at this point. So what is, like it says, like I said, it's the most famous Bigfoot sighting, was caught on camera in 1967. The Patterson-Gimlin film is a minute-long video that appears to show a female Bigfoot, later nicknamed Patty, walking through a clearing in Northern California. The film is still often held up by Bigfoot believers as the best piece of evidence for the creature's existence. The scientific community has overwhelmingly dismissed the film as showing a person wearing a costume. Now, as someone who will say I do believe there is something going on, I personally believe that this particular Patterson Gimlin film was definitely someone wearing a costume. I believe they were good with special effects, and I believe the costume was made out of some sort of rubber or latex. But just because one person is a bad apple and decides to try and trick people doesn't mean that what they're trying to trick people of does not exist. Everything is based on some form of truth. I mean, even dragons might be based on lizards for all we know. There's something there, but it's hard to say what, but there's definitely something out there doing stuff. I believe. Now, Jeffrey Meldrum, a professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University and author of Sasquatch Legend Meets Science, published by Forge Books in 2007, is one of the few scientists to publicly back the film and the existence of Bigfoot. Meldrum told Life Science that not only is he convinced the film is real, but believes it's grown more credible over time. Um, the creature's walk was criticized in the 1960s for being too human, but Meldrum argues that subsequent scientific discoveries, such as Lucy, an extinct 3.2 million year old human ancestor known as Australopithecus. Hold on. Australopithecus afarensis. See, if I say it in a very official sounding voice like a scientist, then I understand the word a lot better. Reveal our ape like ancestors walked upright, so there's now a scientific justification for the creature's human like gait. What you see on that film is exactly how we envisioned something like a robust Australopithecine to look, Meldrum said. It's almost as if now the science has finally caught up to this whole phenomenon of Bigfoot. Meldrum noted that anatomical features visible on the film, such as the proportions of the face, match up with early humans, such as Paranthropus boisei, a species that lived around 2.3 million years ago to 1.2 million years ago, according to the Smithsonian National Museum of History, whom we all know we can trust. Of course, we can trust the Smithsonian. The size of the creature in the film is estimated to be between around 6 to 7 feet tall. However, most experts are not convinced by the footage. Darren Naish, a paleozoologist and author of Hunting Monsters, Cryptozoology, and the Reality Behind the Myths, published by Sirius in 2017, summarized plenty of reasons to question the film's authenticity in a 2020 Twitter thread. Most notably, he highlights that Patterson, who shot the film, had already turned Bigfoot into a money spinning operation before releasing it. But Naish adds that Patty's pelt appears to glisten and move like that of a real animal, and her muscle movements look genuine, suggesting it's a very good hoax. And that's what I thought too. I thought the glistening of the skin made me think it was some sort of rubber or latex. And if it was someone wearing a rubber or latex suit, that would easily explain why the muscle movements look genuine, suggesting it's a very good hoax, which it is. But I still personally believe that particular one to be a hoax. Brian Regal, an associate professor of the history of science at Keene University in New Jersey and author of Searching for Sasquatch, Crackpots, Eggheads, and Cryptozoology, published by Palgrave Macmillan in 2011, is more damning of the film and told Live Science that people project their own views onto Patty. You look at it and you see what you want to believe, he said. Now, Ape Canyon in 1924. The Ape Canyon incident of 1924 wasn't so much an alleged sighting as a supposed battle. A group of, I think this is one of the other ones we briefly went over last time. A group of gold prospectors claimed they defended their cabin against multiple gorilla men in a gorge, later named Ape Canyon. Yeah, yeah, this is one of the ones we went over last time. This is actually one of my favorite Bigfoot stories. This is one of the ones that has interdimensional aspects. Um, on the side of Mount St. Helens, one of the miners, Fred Beck, allegedly shot at a Sasquatch during the day, which prompted a gang of its hairy brethren to seek revenge come nightfall. The creatures are said to have pelted the miner's cabin with rocks and boulders, and one even managed to reach an arm inside. The miner survived the onslaught, and as the sun rose, the beast retreated back into the woods, possibly after Beck shot one. Beck returned to the scene with the U.S. Forest Service Rangers after news broke of the attack. The Rangers couldn't find a Sasquatch body and apparently were not impressed with the large stones they found next to the cabin or the supposed giant footprints nearby. The local The Oregonian newspaper reported at the time. The Rangers seemed to think the miners placed the stones there themselves and that the footprints were made by a human hand. One popular explanation for the Ape Canyon theory story put forward by skeptics, other than the miners simply making it up, is that the miners were actually set upon by a gang of local youths throwing rocks at the cabin for fun, according to travel website Atlas Obscura. All this Although this doesn't account for all aspects of the story. See, what I find strange about that explanation for the story is I find it very difficult to believe that three fully grown men with shotguns and rifles would be afraid of a few children throwing stones or rocks at their cabin. That doesn't seem very likely to me. I find it difficult to believe that three fully grown men with weapons would be afraid of a few children throwing stones at their cabin. No. They are trying to brush that off. Something else happened there. Scott Tompkins, a data manager and founder of the Bigfoot Mapping Project, a website that hosts around 8,000 historical and modern Bigfoot sightings, told Live Science that most Bigfoot sightings he's mapped don't end in conflict. When people describe the behavior of such creatures, they seem to be very curious but non confrontational, Tompkins said. Now, in Provo Canyon in 2012, there are many Bigfoot videos on YouTube, but few are as popular as a clip from Provo Canyon, Utah. The video appears to show a large black animal hunched over in the trees, possibly feeding or foraging. The camera zooms in to try to get a closer look, and a few seconds later, the great creature stands up on two legs as if it's bipedal. This causes the pair behind the camera to immediately turn and run away. The video was posted on October 30th, 2012, and has amassed more than 7.6 million views on YouTube. According to account uploader Beard Card, the pair were on a camping trip hoping to get a closer look at a deer on a hill. On our way up, we thought we saw a bear until the monster stood up and looked right at us, Beard Card wrote in the video description. We ran straight to the car after that, leaving our tent and everything behind. It's probably all still up there. The Provo Canyon video is short and inconclusive. Eric Rickart, curator of vertebrate zoology at the Natural History Museum of Utah, told Fox 13 News Utah after a more recent alleged sighting in 2019 that the science didn't support a Bigfoot in the state. Well, science doesn't support Bigfoot anywhere. Yeah, exactly, old 8 gauge. The children would not even have continued attacking after the first gunshot. I agree with you on that one too. But, science doesn't believe in Bigfoot, so of course science wouldn't support the idea of a Bigfoot in any state. What's the likelihood that there are big animals that have gone undetected by scientists and by trained observers, Rickard said. There are lots of things to discover, particularly in the natural world, but they don't take the form of giant apes running around in largely settled areas of the world. Now, Highcliffe Skunk Ape, 2013. This is a different version, I believe. I've vaguely heard about these, but not much. I don't know much about these. I think they're supposed to be stinky, and that's why they call them skunk apes. Now, skunk apes are supposedly swamp dwelling versions of Bigfoot that are rumored to roam the southeastern U.S. U.S. Sorry. On October 28th, 2013, a YouTube account named Josh Highcliffe uploaded one of the most popular skunk ape videos. In it, the cameraman films a potential skunk ape foraging in a Mississippi swamp. It looks like a gorilla squatted down, big broad shoulders, little peaked head, and is pulling off chunks of wood that seems to demonstrate extreme length. Then, all of a sudden, it stands up and it's got these long legs, Meldrum said, impressed by the video, but yet to examine it in detail. The last shot of the creature in the video comes just as it stands up. Similar to the 2012 Provo Canyon video, unfortunately, people filming Bigfoot have a tendency to suddenly jerk the camera and run away just as they're about to get a good view of one. Understandably fearful if the creature exists, but convenient if they're creating a hoax. This is one of many reasons why skeptics decry such videos and ask believers to produce a body. But you couldn't produce a body if it was in another dimension. That's the believer's argument. And I think that's a very good argument. And they're not wrong. You couldn't produce a body if it was in another dimension. Now, unfortunately, there have been a few hoax bodies in 2008 and 2012. In 2008, two men, Rick Dyer and Matthew Whitten, claimed to possess a frozen body of a Bigfoot specimen. Oh, I've heard this one. I've heard this one before. They said they found it while hiking in the woods in northern Georgia. Their story made headlines, but the body turned out to be a rubber gorilla suit. Okay, I see what I did. I think what I did earlier is I mixed up the what was his face back up here at the top. Sorry, hold up. Let's see. The William Rowe encounter? No, that wasn't it. Hold up. One of the Patterson Gimlin film. That's what I did. The Patterson Gimlin film in 1967. I got it mixed up and confused with this hoax body in 2008. That's what I did earlier. Okay. Dyer was in the news again in 2012 when he claimed to have shot another Bigfoot in San Antonio, Texas. He took the second Bigfoot on tour in 2014 and charged people to see it before admitting it was fake, San Antonio Express News reported at the time. Yep. What was this name? Rick Dyer and Matthew Whitten. That's the story I was thinking of earlier when we were talking about the other one. Okay. That's why I got it confused with the Patterson Gimlin film. I mixed them both together. Yeah, my brain does weird things like that sometimes. I apologize. Well, not as. Then we got some Bigfoot footprints. Oh, I remember these. They took a cast or a mold, I think. While not a sighting per se, Bigfoot footprints are among the most commonly reported aspects of the Bigfoot phenomenon. Even the name Bigfoot stems from a seemingly bogus 1958 story about giant footprints in Northern California found by a man called Ray Wallace. I remember this one. His children later claimed that the prints were their father's prank, according to the Smithsonian Magazine. Oh, look, the Smithsonian actually told the truth for once. Meldrum argues that the hoaxers are rare and that he's got plenty of legitimate footprints that back up the masses of the sightings. I've got over 300 footprint cast copies and original materials in my lab that form the basis of a remarkable body of data that attest to the fact that there's something out there leaving these footprints, Meldrum said. And the most straightforward answer is that it's a bipedal primate species that is not recognized by science. Skeptics, however, will wait for a body. So they're going to keep waiting, it looks like. Old A Gauge says he firmly believes the Patterson film, but didn't want to argue. And I'm not saying I'm hardcore against it. I'm just saying like I've because I will admit I've only vaguely looked into it. Like from because I think I remember them actually telling us about it back in high school. But it has been a very long time since I looked into it. and I only briefly looked into it. So, uh, for you, I will look into it again, but I'll watch it again for you. But I'm not trying to be rude about it. I apologize if it came off that way, because I am open to the idea of Bigfoot. I'm not opposed to the idea at all. I definitely think there's something out there. So that's all we got for this one. So now to finish off, we're going to talk about 10 Bigfoot um books. Bigfoot big books. Big books for Bigfoot. All right. So the 10 best Bigfoot books according to the Bigfoot Times are listed down here. Let's see what we got. So number 10, Bigfoot: A Personal Inquiry into a Phenomenon by Dr. Kenneth Wiley in 1980. Ooh, that's a Yep. That's a big foot. With Bigfoot an unproven species and greatly doubted by the scientific community, it is always nice to have a fresh set of eyes on the topic. Such is the case with Bigfoot: A Personal Inquiry into a Phenomenon by Kenneth Wiley, a PhD in African Studies. Sociologist Ron Westrom, Eastern Michigan University, reviewed this work, and in part he wrote, "There are good books and bad books on Sasquatch. This one holds the distinction of being both. For balance on the Bigfoot subject, I would absolutely recommend reading a book that doesn't align with your belief system. A book that may cause you to ask many questions when you've reached the final page of this 268-page work." Okay, that one sounds interesting. Old A Gauge says the best is Legend Come to Life by Ivan T. Sanderson in 1959. So if anyone's interested in doing deeper research on Bigfoot, check out Legend Come to Life by Ivan T. Anderson. Number 9 on this website is Sasquatch Apparitions by Barbara Wasson, 1979. Barbara Wasson's Sasquatch Apparitions get Braves reviews. I'm assuming they meant rave reviews, in my view, as she is one of the first to assess the credibility of Bigfoot eyewitnesses, and Wasson has the educational background to make that assessment. The late Oregon researcher had the courage to jump into a male dominated activity and later had the gumption to write about some of of the major investigators from that time period, such as Renee Dahinden. It was reported that they were romantic, and she gives him glowing coverage, and John Green. In the past, rarely was the investigator or researcher discussed center point, but all that changed with Wasson's self published book consisting of 173 pages. And then we've got The Historical Bigfoot, second edition by Chad Arment in 2019, coming in at number 8. Gorilla roams Snyder County, Mifflin County on hunt for mystery animal in the woods. The Historical Bigfoot, second edition by Chad Arment, is the second largest Bigfoot book by page count. This one weighing in at a hefty 1,080 pages. Jeez. I'm proud. That's awesome. Good job, Chad Arment. Just writing a book that big alone is quite the accomplishment. This work replaces his earlier work of the same title that was released in 2006 with a mere 346 page count. For the skeptics and doubters who pretend that Bigfoot is a modern day invention that started in 1958 in Northern California, it is hard to understand why there are so many wild man reports from all over North America that predate the 1958 date by more than 100 years. According to the author, different terms were used before Bigfoot became the all encompassing term to describe the phenomenon at hand. So that sounds like a good one. All right, what have we got next? Rain Coast Sasquatch by J. Robert Alley in 2003. The Bigfoot Sasquatch records of southeast Alaska, coastal British Columbia, and northwest Washington from Puget Sound to Yakutat. J. Robert Alley's Rain Coast Sasquatch is one of my favorite books, as it is very clear that the author spent an extraordinary amount of time on an extraordinary book, with the focus being coastal British Columbia and Alaska. The report of a sighting by a Ketchikan taxidermist in October of 1992 makes for fascinating reading. I turned the rifle scope power up to 9, filling the scope with the creature's backside. I could see it was a female. The face was flat and dark skinned. She had a broad nose with flared nostrils. She got up. She didn't use her hands, states the witness. He goes one. I could see she had a huge abdomen. She looked pregnant. I thought of squeezing the trigger a good number of times. And next, number 6, Bigfoot, the Yeti and Sasquatch in Myth and Reality by John Napier, 1972. Ooh, this looks like Antarctica almost. All that snow. I like lots of snow, but not in real life, only in fiction. I like to see it in photographs, and it's fun to look at in movies, but not in the real world. No. What is interesting about the late Dr. John Russell Napier is that he was involved with the first Bigfoot documentary on Bigfoot. Really? You had the first Bigfoot documentary on Bigfoot? I thought it was going to be a Bigfoot documentary on Mothra. Come on with the over explaining, guys. Gals, whoever wrote this. BigfootTimes.net. Hey, BigfootTimes.net. Why so much over explaining? I thought the Bigfoot documentary was going to be about Mothman. Come on now. Produced by the BBC in England, and the centerpiece of his discussion is largely focused on the Patterson Gimlin film, often shortened to PG film, in which he vacillates between the footage being real or faked. It was only a few years later, in 1972, his Bigfoot, the Yeti, and Sasquatch in Myth and Reality would be published. With unquestionable qualifications as one of the world's leading primatologists, Dr. Napier ventured into the goblin universe by going against the tide and writing scientifically in this work, said the distinguished scientist. I am convinced that the Sasquatch exists. Well, this is coming from an esteemed scientist now, so people might need to start taking this a bit more seriously. North America's Great Ape, the Sasquatch, by Dr. John A. Bindernagel, 1998. And it looks like they have some little drawings comparing it to a black bear, I suppose. A wildlife biologist looks at the continent's most misunderstood large mammal. In the past 30 years, numerous books have been published about reported observations of giant hairy bipeds in the forests of North America, but none by a scientist qualified to assess whether what the witness described added up to a believable animal. John Bindernagel, with a PhD in wildlife biology and extensive field experience in more than one part of the world, has now supplied that need. North America's Great Ape, the Sasquatch, could prove to be the most important book yet written on this fascinating subject, says John Green, author of The Sasquatch File, On the Track of the Sasquatch, Year of the Sasquatch, and Sasquatch, the Apes Among Us. Finally, here is a book that goes beyond the debate about whether or not the Sasquatch exists. Number 4, Sasquatch, Legend Meets Science, by Dr. Jeff Meldrum, 2006. Sasquatch, Legend Meets Science by Dr. Jeff Meldrum is an exceptional book, as the author has a tremendous background not just in his discipline of anatomy and anthropology, but also in the field of Bigfooting. His writing in this 297-page book is in depth, careful, scientific, and straightforward. Dr. Meldrum is perhaps the most scientifically educated on the subject, having learned from the works of the Dr. Grover Krantz and others. Dr. Meldrum is not just an armchair scientist, he is one of the most active participants in the field, having checked out stories from first hand sources, and his travels and lectures to date have been rather extensive. Number 3, The Sasquatch and Other Unknown Hominids by Dr. Vladimir Markotic, 1984. So the cover is kind of basic. If you judge a book by its cover, the plain yellow of course, the plain yellow cover of The Sasquatch and Other Unknown Hominoids, would have fared poorly. This now out of print work, rare and badly advertised gem of 335 pages, was edited by the late Dr. Vladimir Markotic, with whom I believe I had the privilege of meeting once in June 1989 at the general meeting for the now defunct International Society of Cryptozoology in Pullman, Washington. Although this work is a compilation of several authors, including Grover Krantz, John Green, Dmitry Bayanov, and Carlton Kuhn, and others, contributors poured considerable amount of time and thought into their writing with extensive amount of reference material. See, there is a lot. Oh yeah, I actually do. I completely agree with you on that, old 8 gauge. I do not think they are apes. I think they're something entirely different. I do agree with you on that one. Because apes, that would just be far too simple. It would just be too simple. Now Sasquatch, the apes among us. But yeah, I get why you wanted to point that out because a lot of these books call them apes. But yes, I do agree. I think there's something different. This is a top choice for myself and scores of readers who followed the subject. By 1968, the lanky Canadian had already authored a treasure on the track of the Sasquatch with a lot of original pictures and text. 2 more booklets would follow. With the publication of his 492-page opus in 1978, the Columbia University schooled journalist made it crystal clear that Sasquatch was much more than a mere legend. In order to write this important contribution, the late John Green, along with Dennis Gates, toured the United States looking for sighting and footprint reports firsthand. And the most popular book of all is Abominable Snowman, Legend Come to Life by Ivan T. Anderson, as Old 8 Gauge recommended. Good recommendation, bro. Good recommendation. The story of subhumans on 5 continents from the early Ice Age until today. Okay, that actually does sound pretty awesome. I'm with it. I'm here for this. So they're saying that it's like an early version of humans that survived through the flood. Is this kind of where this is headed? That sounds pretty cool. My number one pick for a multitude of reasons would be the late Ivan Sanderson's Abominable Snowman Legend Come to Life. It was one of the first books to be published in this genre, and outside of Odette Sharon, who also released a Snowman book, I can think of only a few other Bigfoot books that preceded these works. Since the publication of this work, Sanderson has been repeatedly vilified by his most ardent critics. Imagine for a moment writing a 500-page plus book without the aid of a word processor around 1961. So, that's like with a quill and a feather and an inkwell and writing every single letter of every single word on every single page by hand. You toil on away on your manuscript with a manual typewriter. Ooh. I actually want to get a typewriter, but typewriters are kind of expensive these days and kind of rare. I could only find like 2 typewriters, and both of them were like over $200. Like, guys, can we get some more variety on typewriters and some modern typewriters, please? Bring back the typewriters. Okay, I'm done. Well, Ivan T. Sanderson did just that, and he did it well, both in scholarship, writing style, appendices, maps, and a voluminous bibliography in his opus. What is noteworthy is Ivan Sanderson's book in 1961, prior to the Patterson Gimlin film from 1967, contained a subtitle like this: The Story of Subhumans on Five Continents from the Early Ice Age until Today. But in his paperback edition, published in November 1968 by Pyramid Books, the subtitle would change: An Account of Reports on the Existence of Ultra Primitive Hominids on Five Continents, which might suggest the PG film may have had a profound effect on Sanderson. That almost sounds like censorship to me, because subhumans, ultra primitive hominids, and they completely removed from the early ice age until today. That part was pretty important. Yep. And that was actually a very good timing. We finished right on time to land right on an hour today. Thank you for coming to hang out with me, Old 8 Gauge. I've had fun doing the Bigfoot shows, and we will see what we get into next week. Thank you for hanging out. And as always, as we say around here, stay uncanny. We hope to see you next time. Thank you, and have a good night.